Today, we're comparing two absolute heavyweights in the home audio world, the Samsung Q990D
and the Sonos Arc Ultra setup with sub 4 and two Era 300 rears. But is the premium price of Sonos really worth it?
Or can the Samsung deliver top-notch audio at the fraction of the cost?
Let's dive in and find out.
Hey guys, Ellen Lou here from Smart Home Sounds, and if you've seen this channel before, you'll know we're big into our home cinema systems, and these two, well, they're two of the very best on the market right now.
But with some key differences and a pretty considerable difference in price, which one should you guys be spending your money on? Now, spoiler alert, although me and Al do tend to agree on a lot of things, today we are definitely on opposite sides of the debate.
Yeah, and I think although both of us can agree we see the value in both of these systems, ultimately I'm back in the Samsung.
And me, well, I'm back in the Sonos.
So to help you decide which is right for you, we'll be breaking down our pros and cons for a number of categories, including sound quality, design, features, and value for money.
Now, we'd love for you guys to get involved in the comments below and let us know which side of the fence you're on by the end of this video. Now, in previous head-to-heads on this very channel, we had the bald guy and the one with the hair. So for this one, we've got the one with the beard and the one with no beard, if you can't quite remember our names.
Yeah, and in all seriousness, the point of this video is to show you guys that what does it for one person isn't going to be the same for another. So as we get through this video, just make sure you're weighing each category accordingly to what you value most. That's how you're going to make the best decision.
Right then, now, should we get into it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Right then, now, do you want to kick us off with the need to knows for the Samsung Q990D then?
Sure. Now, if you've already watched our Ultimate Dolby Atmos soundbar showdown, you'll know all about this one. It's a complete home cinema system made up of soundbar, up-firing rears, and a sub that comes in a single box. It's a successor to the award-winning Q990C, and although it introduces a couple of upgrades, not a great deal has changed. We've still got the same design and internal drive unit, it still supports Dolby Atmos and DTS:X, and it's packed with loads of features like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, Alexa, AirPlay 2, Spotify Connect, and more. There's a total of 22 speakers in here capable of delivering 11.1.4 channel Dolby Atmos surround sound. And yeah, while you'd initially say it's expensive with an RRP of £1,699, during the sales you can actually find some serious deals on it. I mean, I've seen it come under the £1,000 mark, which as far as I'm aware makes this one of the best value complete home cinema packages on the market by quite some way.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, it's definitely up there for what you get from that price point. Now, the Arc Ultra home cinema setup is made up of the all-new Sonos Arc Ultra with that totally revamped 14-driver array with sound motion bass woofer, a pair of upward firing and spatial audio-enabled Sonos Era 300s, and the newly refined Sub 4 2. Now, admittedly, while this isn't a one-box home cinema in the same way the Q990D is, and they are all separate components, you can find it bundled together, including from us right here at Smart Home Sounds. But the total cost of the soundbar, the sub, and the rears from this Sonos setup comes to an RRP of £2,696. So what do you get for that extra cash then? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be getting into throughout this video. But a standout difference with Sonos as a brand is that you can create a whole home ecosystem over Wi-Fi with your home cinema setup in one room and various other speakers and soundbars throughout your home that can have different things playing in different zones, or you can have the same thing playing throughout your space.
Yeah, the Samsung is more of a one-room solution there. But anyway, lots to think about already. So should we dive into design?
Let's do it. I mean, you can immediately see just how different these two are when it comes to design. Two very, very different aesthetics here.
Yeah, you're right. Now, as someone who's actually gone out and bought this for themselves, I think I'm pretty well placed to say that the design isn't one of the Q990D's standout features. It's definitely not something that's blending in very easily, and it's fairly bulky. It's very much just designed to get the job done. Now, I don't mind it. The black goes well in my space, and for reference, it only comes in that color. And I do like that the rears are nice and small and easy to accommodate in your space. I will say though, the sub is pretty large, and I can see why some of the more design conscious of you might be a little put off by that.
Yeah, now don't get me wrong. In terms of physical footprint, neither of these two options are small, and both will be pretty domineering in your space. But the Samsung Sub and soundbar are considerably bigger than the Arc Ultra and Sub 4, and I just think that the overall boxiness and the fact that it only comes in one colorway does make it feel a little bit more imposing overall. Plus, I don't really vibe with that screen on the front either.
Yeah, I knew you'd say that. And to be fair, that isn't the best. I like that it does give you information, but it's not done in the nicest way.
I think for me, although I can appreciate that the design of the Q990D is functional, I just don't think it's as easy to blend into your space as the Sonos is. The curved edges on the Arc Ultra soundbar are softer, and it really does help it to be a little bit more discreet. And also, the Sub 4 is easier to fit into your space, and you can even lie it under your sofa if you prefer.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is that the Era 300s are a bit bigger than the Q990D's rears, so you do just have to be a bit more careful about general placement, don't you?
Yeah, that's true. You do need to have the right space to place them. Now, you can always use a wall mount or floor stands though, and if you're really struggling, you could of course always drop down to the smaller Era 100 rears, but of course, then you would lose out on some of that extra height immersion that you get with the 300s.
Yeah, that's a good point though. I didn't actually think about that. And for me, I will say, while I don't mind the Q990D's design, personally, I can appreciate the Sonos is overall the better looking of the two.
Yeah, now there'll definitely be some of you guys watching who like the Q990D design, but yeah, if we're picking a winner for design, for me, it's surely got to be the Sonos, right?
Yeah, you can have that one.
Right then, what about setup and connectivity, Al? Because I know that you've been desperate to talk about this one.
Absolutely, because in terms of what Samsung offer with the Q990D, you're pretty well stocked. I get that Sonos likes to keep things simple. The Arc Ultra has one HDMI eARC port, one Ethernet, a mains connection, and everything else connects wirelessly. But the Q990D is just a bit easier to set up, and there's a bit more going on in terms of connections. I mean, one of the Q990D's main feature upgrades was with the HDMIs. They've been upgraded to full 2.1 spec, with full support for advanced gaming features like 4K 120Hz, VRR and ALLM. So the fact that the Q990D has two HDMI inputs for pass-through is a massive bonus, especially if you're like me and have a couple of different devices you'd like to get hooked up. The Q990D also has an optical input too, which isn't a massive deal, but good if you've got an older TV, for example.
Yeah, you can get an optical adapter for the Arc Ultra, but at an extra cost. Now, pass-through is something that a lot of Sonos fans have been asking for, but do I think it's likely? Truthfully, no. So if that is a priority for you, then the Q990D is a great option to consider. But for me personally, I think there's enough connectivity from the Sonos, and I have everything I need. But on paper, the Q990D does definitely offer more flexibility.
Yeah, I think it just ticks more boxes. It might not be important for everyone, but the options are there. Okay then, what about other features then? Do you want to start us off, Lou?
Sure. Now, Sonos has always been pretty well regarded, right, when it comes to extra features. And with some neat enhancements to the Arc Ultra over the previous iteration, I think that's even more true than ever. Now, obviously, we've got all of the usual features you'd expect from a Sonos home cinema system, like Dolby Atmos, Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, Amazon Music, but this particular setup also brings some added functionality to the table too, like Bluetooth connectivity and TruePlay support for Android devices, as well as iOS, which have both been long requested within the Sonos community. Now, for context, TruePlay is Sonos's room optimization software, so you can get the most out of the setup in your space, which is really important for getting the best out of those Atmos and height channels. Now, Samsung's got something similar, right?
Yeah, it's called SpaceFit. It's fully automatic, which is pretty cool, but I'll get into all the details a little later. What's the Sonos like for control?
Well, this one doesn't come with a dedicated remote, but you can control it directly on the soundbar itself using the touch controls. Now, you can also use your TV remote, your voice, or the Sonos app. In there, you'll find all of your audio adjustments, so your dedicated EQs for each separate component of your home cinema, and some extra features like night mode and speech enhancement, and the ability to adjust the height channels and more. There's also the option to pair your soundbar with the Sonos Ace using the TV audio swap feature, which is really handy for someone like myself who already owns a pair. And of course, all of that wider ecosystem and multi-room support too, if you're somebody who's already heavily invested into Sonos or you're looking to add to your system later down the line.
Fair play. There's no DTS:X or Chromecast though, is there?
No, you're right. And that will put a lot of people off. But for me and for my listening habits, it's not a huge deal breaker. So What about the Samsung Q990D then?
Well, the Q990D isn't a slouch either. Unlike the Sonos, you've got Dolby Atmos and DTS:X support. There's Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, Alexa built-in, Google Home support, AirPlay 2, Spotify Connect, Chromecast, and more. It's also got what I mentioned earlier, so space-fit calibration, which is basically Samsung's version of TruePlay tuning, and this automatically tunes the sound to your room. Plus, if you have a compatible Samsung TV, you can connect this system up wirelessly, or you can use Q Symphony, which actually combines the TV speakers with the soundbar itself to produce an enlarged center channel. There's 4 selectable sound presets, so standard, surround, game pro, and adaptive sound, and there's a couple of other extra modes too, like active voice amplifier, voice enhancement, bass enhancement, night mode, and virtual, which all do exactly what they say on the tin. There's also HDMI pass-through, which again I mentioned earlier, and you can also now use the rear speakers as front, left, and right center channels for music to improve the stereo imaging, which is a pretty cool addition. This one also comes with a remote, which is nice if you prefer more simple setup, but if you want more control, you can always use the Samsung SmartThings app, which gives you a bit more flexibility. I'll admit it's probably not as streamlined as Sonos is, but if we're talking purely about the amount of extra features, the Samsung is pretty packed.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this will of course depend on your specific use case, right? So if you've got a compatible Samsung TV, or if you watch a lot of DTS:X content, I can see why you'd pick the Q990D based on its features. But the Sonos also has a lot of plus points and great features too.
Definitely. Both are pretty great in this area, so do you reckon we call this a draw?
I think so.
Yeah, cool. Right then, do you think it's time for sound performance?
I think so. Now, for the record, guys, we've tested both of these in these same environments and with a variety of different content, from blockbuster movies to music, and we've got a lot that we want to share with you all.
Yeah, we've loved putting these two head to head, and both are great systems, but to address the elephant in the room, the Sonos is ahead of the Samsung, as I would expect with that difference in price. But the thing I was really interested to see was just how close the Q990D could push it. And I have to say, there are some really good plus points for the Samsung. It throws a huge soundstage, the bass is good, and the dynamics and front height effects are actually very impressive. Plus, it's a bit of a powerhouse.
I agree. It's definitely powerful, and that's a huge strength, especially for action movies. It can definitely get loud and fill a space, but I did find that it got a little bit overwhelmed, especially with the more complex scenes. Now, the Sonos system handled the layering of sound effects, vocals, and music with a little bit more care, with each element better balanced and more evenly separated. And overall, that made it a more enjoyable experience, and it kept me engaged in the content better.
Yeah, there's definitely something to be said about those more complex scenes. I think if you just watched and listened to the Q990D setup, it sounds good, but when we swapped over to the Arc Ultra setup, I think it highlighted how the audio should sound when it's balanced correctly. But in more refined ones, like the scene at the start of Furiosa, you've got to say the differences in performance were less noticeable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that scene in Furiosa really highlights the strengths of both systems. So both felt detailed and clean and were really, really immersive. While the Sonos offered better Atmos immersion overall and a more natural performance, I'd say that the Samsung really wasn't too far behind.
No, definitely not. But what about vocals and bass then? Because I was actually pretty impressed with the Samsung on that front.
Yeah, for sure. The Q990D was good, but for me, the Sonos was better. The bass on the Q990D is really decent. It's punchy and definitely brought the rumble, and the Sonos stepped it up another level. Obviously, a lot of that is down to the subwoofer, right? It's a cracking piece of kit in its own right, and although the Q990D sub is impressive and outperforms most all-in-one systems that we've tested, the subwoofer's force-cancelling design just makes for deeper, more rumbling low-end performance. There's just more of a bass presence, and it offers more depth overall. I think if you're the type of person who prefers a little more nuanced performance over sheer volume, then you're probably gonna lean more towards the Sonos system, in my opinion.
Is that more of the same with the vocals as well then?
Yeah, I mean, both of these have got dedicated center channels, right? And there's no doubt that the Q990D's vocals are impressive. They're good for what you're paying, but the Arc Ultra just takes it up a notch. Dialogue just sounded more natural, richer, and almost more lifelike. Now, it was subtle, but you could definitely hear the difference. And I'd also say that TruePlay is pretty similar too. I actually quite liked how SpaceFit worked with the Samsung, but I did think TruePlay helped add a bit more immersion and made sound come into the room a little bit better.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from, but I think that's where you really have to start weighing up the difference in price. I think there's no denying that the Sonos system is the better collection of speakers. I mean, you just look at the Era 300s. They're an award-winning standalone speaker. But when you think you're paying nearly double the price for that whole thing, are you really getting double the performance? Because that's what you've really got to weigh up.
Yeah, totally. I completely agree. And that's not going to be a clean-cut answer or the same answer for everyone. But for me, as someone who loves top-tier sound quality, I personally think that the extra investment is worth it. I mean, just looking at those Era 300s that you mentioned, for example, you can feel that they've got a better handle on those Dolby Atmos height effects. They feel a bit more refined, more precise, and I think that feeling multiplied across the board definitely makes for a pretty compelling argument. I personally would prefer to start with the Arc Ultra soundbar and save up over time to add the rears and the sub as and when I had the budget for it. But as a complete system, the Sonos just gives a much more premium sound performance, and the immersion, the bass and vocals, I would argue are a level above the Q990D.
No, I can't argue with you there. But what I can argue is that the Q990D is still a very impressive package. And actually, if you didn't have them side by side like we did in testing, I don't think you'd know what you're missing out on. It's a great package for movies, gaming, and general TV viewing, and for a lot of people would be money very well spent.
Yeah, to be fair, I can't argue with that either. So what are we saying for a winner of this category then?
Well, I reckon it's got to go to the Sonos, though I think we should give the Q990D some bonus points for value for money.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Nice.
So, you guys have heard how these setups measure up for us across the different categories, but Al, where does that leave us now?
Well, I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all answer here. I think we've got two very different systems trying to achieve the same overall goal, and that's to deliver an immersive home cinema experience. For me, the Samsung Q990D is a real powerhouse, and it's packed with features, sounds great, it's simple to set up, and it offers a couple of features that the Sonos actually misses out on, like HDMI pass-through, DTS:X support, and seamless integration with the Samsung TV. And I mean, come on, for the price, it's a fantastic deal. You're getting some serious bang for your buck with this one, and it's a system that's going to last you a very long time if you do choose to go with it. And yes, there are things I admire about the Sonos system, but if I'm brutally honest, I just can't justify that step up in cost.
Yeah, to be fair, I can see exactly what you're saying, and I think that's fair enough. The Q990D is a very, very good alternative if your budget can't stretch. I just think, although the Sonos represents a significant step up in price, it's also a significant step up in performance. And if you have the budget and want a truly premium audio experience, then the Sonos system is worth serious consideration. You're getting a cohesive, complete system with superb sound quality, sleek styling, and incredible flexibility. The ability to swap out components down the line gives you a lot of options to customize your setup over time, and the extra multi-room benefits of the Sonos ecosystem are also up there with the very, very best.
Okay, so bottom line?
If value for money and some of those extra features that you mentioned are important for you, then the Samsung Q990D is the way to go. But if you prioritize the best sound quality and you want a system that can really grow with you, then the Sonos system is where you're going to want to be looking. Sound about right?
Couldn't have put it better myself. But anyway, guys, what do you think? Which home cinema system are you picking? Let us know down in the comment section below.
Yes, and whilst you guys are down there, if you did enjoy this video, then make sure you drop us a subscribe as well. Thank you guys very much for watching, and we will catch all of you in the next video.